Alright guys, Cop Cutlass here, Sunday fun day. Did quite a bit. I went and worked, and then I did a little bit more work after I worked. Came home, grabbed some stuff, went back at it. I actually stole the carburetor off of the Pontiac for the engine that is currently on my engine run stand. I was debating on whether or not the carburetor that I had on that engine was good or not, so I ruled that out. It's got an old points distributor. I think it's a spark issue. It's not a bad deal. Engine runs great. Put a vacuum gauge on it. It's just, it doesn't like the fast rev. It'll lean pop out of the carburetor, which I think it's the fact that the carburetor I have on there is a vacuum secondaries carb, and also the distributor is, I'm going to get an HEI because the 347 stroker over here, that's going to go on the run stand at the beginning of next year. This is going to go on the run stand as soon as I get the intake mounted. I went and bought Allen head bolts at the hardware store for it, and I spent way more money than I should have because I bought them at the hardware store, but I think it was like 30 bucks. It's not bad. So either way, what I want to talk about today is the specs and the cost and what we have into this engine all together. Somebody asked me, and I guess it's been like sporadic. There hasn't been a moment where I actually said all the specs for the engine because I've just been saying them as I go. So unless you actually followed throughout the whole engine build, you really haven't been fed all of the info all at once. So this is what I'm doing. Like I said, all that's left is to actually bolt and torque the intake down, which I really don't torque them down. I actually just go until my elbow cracks. I'm kidding. No, I just snug them down and just give them a good, I follow the pattern. I just don't, I've never torqued down an intake on an old engine ever, or any engine I've ever built. So let's get to it, guys. So here you go. It's a 30/350. The cylinder heads are J-headed, big block heads that they've been milled. They measured in at 68 cc's. If you guys remember the video we did with the syringes and measuring, they came out at under 70. So I'm leaving a little room for air, so between 68 and 70 is good. Our compression is going to be between 10 1/4 to 10.35, and that leaves a little room for error on my part. Either way, this engine will be good on premium pump gas, just like the engine that's in my car right now. That's iron-headed, 10 1/4 to 1, and I run it on pump 93. So I guess we'll work our way down my sheet the way I have everything written down. Our piston rings are set up 21 thousandths end gap on the top ring, 24 on the second ring. Our main journal bearing clearances are just a little over 3 thousandths on all of them. On an average, it's between 3 thou and like I think it was maybe 3/10, so it's a little plus or minus, but they're all just a little over 3 thou on the rod bearing clearances. The rod journal clearances are all about 3.5 thou, main bearing clearances. The piston to wall clearance is 4 1/4. This is very, very important on the Speed Pro flat tops because on the box, which is in the garbage, it specifies that your piston to wall clearance needs to be 2 thou, but that's for a factory cast piston. The forged piston expands different. This is a widely known issue in the Oldsmobile world that what they suggest is just wrong. You're gonna kill the engine if you follow exactly what Speed Pro says. So piston to wall clearance on this is 4 1/4. So that's 4 thou, 2.5 tenths. The cam we installed and degreed. It is installed straight up. It matched our cam card, and I'll follow the specs off the card. I didn't write them down on my sheet. The valve lift on the intake is 557. On the exhaust, it's 574. With the lash, it calls for 18 and 20. I just set them all to 19. Not going to worry about 1 thou. I just did it that way. It's on a 110 low separation angle. And you're looking at about 240 duration at 50 thousandths lift and 253 on the exhaust at 50 thousandths lift as well. It's got lifter restrictors that I opened up to about a little over 50 thou. They were metric drill bits. They're between 50 and 60, so we're good for any street driving. That was the advice I was given, so I went with that. It's smaller than the factory opening, but bigger than what the restrictor came with, so we're good. It has main restrictors, so feeding the oil into the cam. It's got restrictors that were installed prior. We ran with that because it had been drilled for that. What else did we do here? Let's see. And that's pretty much it on all of this stuff. We did open up the bearings for the restrictors. That's also very important if you're running restrictors that line up the oil holes. I mean, the oil, if the restrictor's installed properly, the oil's going to find its way out, but it's a direct shot if you open up the bearing. So we did all that stuff. We'll get on to the financial end of this engine build. So, I've been noting down what I've spent. And as you guys know, if you guys build stuff, there's stuff that'll nickel and dime you. So I left a open balance on top, which should be more than enough to cover what's left on this. So the block, the oil pan, and the pistons that were original with this engine, I paid $300 for the scraps of the original build. And it came with main studs, cap straps, they had the oil modifications and the lifters, the restrictors, all that stuff. I saw it fit to be a good candidate for a budget build. I needed a core engine for a crankshaft, and that crankshaft was no good, and then the other crankshaft was no good, and then I finally got a good crankshaft. So between all that shit, we killed $200 for a good crankshaft. I still have one that's slightly bent. We just didn't want to repair it. It's got about 2 thou run out total. And then I bought the Performer RPM intake for $125. I did have that single plane and the roller cam, which I sold both of those items because they did me no good just sitting around. The bearings, rings, miscellaneous stuff that I ordered with that group of parts, that came out to be $260. The solid cam, the angle cam, and the aluminum water pump we're going to be using, I got for $150. The heads, the Harlan shop roller rockers, the oil pump pickup, the balancer, and the flex plate were all $800 for everything. The machine work came out to $1,200. And with that total, that comes out to $3,380. Now, there's some stuff to add reality to it. The billet timing chain that I have and the blueprinted oil pump that I have was kind of a trade in labor. I'm supposed to paint a hood for a friend of mine. And really, I like to help my friends out. But if I'm going to put a value on it, I'm just going to put face value on it. We're going to add $200 to that. So that puts us at $3,580. And then I need little odds and ends. I spent $30 on these bolts, and I'm sure I'm going to need little things here and there. So we're at $3,580. Let's call the whole build $3,700. And that's pretty good. I mean, it's a budget build, but budget is relative. So if you guys turn the Wayback Machine on YouTube, I built a 350 for my friend Eric just about over 2 years ago. It was the spring before I got married, so it was 2019. All right, so 2019, I built a 350 for him that was a super low budget engine. He paid me labor. He paid for parts. I think all said and done, he might have like $2,000 into that engine. Now, if he didn't have labor in it, he'd be even better into it. So let's take into consideration the engine that's like in the Pontiac. That was a budget build. The short block was a 73 350 with 72 heads, an Edelbrock Performer intake. The stock valves were just given a quick little valve job. The heads were cleaned up, checked, stock springs, stock rocker arms. The bottom end was freshened up, just new rings, bearings. It's got a Comp 260H cam in it, an Edelbrock Performer intake on it, And that engine, top to bottom, I believe altogether cost me $1,800. And that was with the $400 I spent on the cylinder heads. And then I spent another $800 on the short block. There's $1,200, $100 on the intake. There's $1,300 plus other odds and ends. That whole engine ended up being about like $1,800, $1,700. That was about 15 years ago. And it still runs great. And Eric's budget built engine, which was even more scrapper built than that, he drives the wheels off that car. So yes, the term budget is relative. So this would be like a budget race engine, street strip engine. I don't know what you would want to call it. I'm using it for bracket racing, much like I'm using my current engine. But this was built like a backup. But this is going to be more utilitarian, just for the simple fact that I wasn't worried about the single plane intake, this, that, or the other. I'm worried about the car staying in a certain range of time and performance, and this engine I think should be definitely capable of producing probably around 410, 415 horsepower all day long. The current engine in my car is producing about 425-ish, 430-ish by the numbers, and that's fairly good. I mean, there's nothing really fancy about that engine. Now, the difference between this engine and the engine that's in my car is that I think these cylinder heads probably flow a little bit better just because the ports are so much bigger. The RPM might limit a little bit of RPM. The RPM intake might limit a little bit of RPM out of the engine, but I highly doubt it. So I think altogether for $3,700 and the networking and buying people's good old used stuff, I think we managed to cut the price pretty much in half. I think if you were to try to build this engine start to finish with all new parts, proper, and having a shop do it, you'd probably be into it well over $7,000, because I know for a fact the engine that's in my car now, you could not build it for $7,000. The cylinder heads have a lot of time. There's probably over $2,000 in the cylinder heads alone, and then the machining work on that engine was $1,500 alone. And then, we did the custom work to the intake. There's a lot of stuff on that engine that altogether would probably cost north of $7,000 if you had a shop to do it. I did a lot of horse trading. I did all of my engine assembly myself. My friend did the cylinder heads. I helped him a lot with that. I learned a lot. I was able to share with you guys some of that stuff. So on that particular engine, yes, it would be, for a lot of the stuff that I did, it would be very expensive. And the same thing with this engine. If I was to start a build like this and recreate this engine start to finish, you'd probably be into it around $7,000 or over easily, depending on who built it. And this is if you went through a shop and had somebody do it. So we managed to keep this engine built under $4,000. I think it's realistic. I think that the biggest thing is people have to learn to network and have a group of people that will just call you when they got old parts that they don't want or they don't need, which is great. I've built my little network, if you will, even on the forums. People know, and I got my friends who, like JJ. When he's got stuff, he always lets me know. That's how I'm ending up with his old diff. I knew he wanted a Fab 9, and I'm like, hey, if you want this, that, or the other, I'll buy yours. What do you want for it? I wanted to do an S60, but it's overkill for my car, and I know his rear end's good. So either way, whole point is, I don't know what your definition of budget is, but for me is, I didn't pay full price for this engine. So it was a budget build. I'm into it for $3,700, and I think hopefully it performs good. Success is not guaranteed, and I hope it lasts. The engine that's in my car was built the same way, and it's been a great engine. So on that note, I'll let you guys go. I hope you've enjoyed the build. I'm thinking in 2-3 weeks we're going to get this on the run stand if I get everything together, and hopefully everything's good and it'll just get wrapped up and sit on the stand ready to use whenever I need it. So unfortunately, this engine is not destined to go into anything anytime soon. It's going to be ready to go when I need it. The car will be ran the same way next year in our points program. So I hope that you guys have enjoyed everything. Share, like, subscribe. Follow me on Instagram at Scott for Cutlass. So I'll let you guys go.